I'm here today with Mary Lynn, and I'm so glad to have you here because a lot of people recommend it, and I've been following, and I know a lot about Odin beforehand, and got curious about it, and also I'm glad that you accepted. But for people that who don't know who the hell is Mary, can you let us know who is Mary?
um, this is probably that's a deep question. Who am I? Well, obviously, I can go through my background and what I'm building now, but I had quite a, before doing Odin, I had probably more of a more chaotic than interesting career path. I tried a lot of different jobs in my 20s, was really trying to figure out, what is it that I love that allows me to have the impact that I want to have. A lot of people early 20s have no idea what they want to do, right? But I really jumped around a lot. I tried prop tech, fintech, education, consulting, did a stint as a recruiter, worked in publishing twice, started two companies, and that was just
Wow.
between the ages of 20 and 27. Um, so that was kind of early to mid 20s. And then now with Odin, we're basically on a mission to let more people vote with their money on what the future looks like. And I think, probably doesn't need explaining, but where money goes obviously is really impactful.
Hmm.
Where resources go in society, and I know a lot of founders talk about wanting to build a better future, whatever. But I think actually more important to that question is, when you talk about progress, what do you actually mean, right? Like, whose idea of progress are we building towards? And you have to be aware that different people have different priorities and different needs.
Yeah.
And so, um, with us, it's really letting more people participate in shaping that future. In terms of what we're actually building, we decided to start with what you might call the plumbing, that allows anyone anywhere to set up an angel syndicate or venture capital fund. So really
Uh,
letting more people become capital allocators to point money in certain directions. How we handle
okay.
setting everything up from legal structures to payments and reporting. It's all quite boring,
Okay,
really.
interesting. No, no, no. It's quite a interesting change because at my time, for example, when I was working with startups on AWS, let's say, we as a big company that was helping a lot of startups, our way of invest on them was to give them a time, right? We didn't want to pick it up AWS money and put into startups because, yeah, well, we do that after some time, but usually not. But people also want to do that, and I don't think that investing in anything is supposed to be just for big angel investors or things like that. And is that the goal of Odin itself? Is like democratizing those kind of investors? And is that just for tech startups, or is it like investment in general?
So, through our platform, people have invested in all sorts of things. Sometimes I think actually someone ended up investing in almost like a community where they were building like almost like a village in Portugal. Um,
Oh,
uh, Again, I think there's lots of different things that are good for society that aren't just tech or tech enabled, right? As long as it's investing into a private company, we can help facilitate that. Um, in terms of kind of where we are now, the target customer is it's more sophisticated investors, right? But longer term, it is about letting more people participate. The thing that's quite important here is, um, it's really risky to invest in really early stage businesses, right? And
mm,
actually, my grandma should not be choosing deal by deal or putting like, you know, more than a few thousand a year into early stage startups. And so for us, it's really about, if you do want more people investing, then how do you de-risk this a little bit, right? So maybe your average Joe on the street can go, hey, I really care about climate tech, and I'm going to give you this money, and I want to put it in to kind of like an ETF for the private markets, and this is going to be spread across 50 fund managers who really know what they're doing, but at least I can choose where my money goes based on the problems I really care about.
interesting, interesting. And how did it come for you to like co-found it and to be a part? Because you were born and raised in London or something like.
No, grew up in, so I went to high school in Oxford, primary school in Bristol, and I met my co-founder literally, I want to say like we either met like 2 weeks before we started working on this, or we actually met
Wow.
before and then came back and met again. But we didn't really know each other before starting this. But when just in your gut you meet someone and you're like, oh my god, this is who I've been looking for the last 10 years.
So it was kind of like founder love at the first
Yeah,
sight,
yeah,
almost
yeah,
kind of
for
it.
sure. Yeah, like
Wow.
trust, complementary skills, same sense of humor. But yeah, it was kind of like, this is it. I found you. And then we kind of just bounced ideas around. I think we started out building something that was so this was also literally the month of lockdown, and selfishly, I also want to build stuff that I don't want to just build something if I'm not going to enjoy the journey, and I
Mm-hmm.
really care about. I just moved back to London from Berlin at the time. I was really excited to get back into meeting new people in London, and then lockdown hit. So I was also like, oh, let's build a community because then I can make new friends. So we actually started out as a community. Um, I think we built like this product hunt type thing at the beginning where people could submit their ideas. One of the things we were really interested in was like collective intelligence. If you do get lots of different people's opinions
Ah.
and average them, what are the predictions more accurate? And there's lots of studies that show that that it is right, if you take the
So
average of
you kind of build like a deal table in the community thing just to talk about deals and like all of it.
just
And
to submit startups we thought were cool,
ah,
and then naturally people wanted to invest in the startups, right? So then we ended up investing in one of the startups as a community, which involved kind of rolling up a bunch of investors to invest together as one legal entity. I think for anyone who doesn't understand this, it's kind of like, why do you need to build something for this? So a lot of the times when people invest, they'll invest directly in a company. Like, I talk to the company and I invest, and then I sign some contracts, write investment documents. A lot of the time when people do that, founders don't really want to have like 1,000 people investing in their company, investing £1,000 each or whatever. They're kind of like, oh, well, I'd rather just talk to one really big investor, right, and have them invest 2 million. Um,
exactly.
when you have all of these people investing as one entity, it's kind of like you could go to a founder and say, hey, we're investing together, but you only have to interact really with like one person, and we're going
Mm-hmm.
to give you maybe £200,000, right, rather than 1,000. And it keeps the cap table clean, bunch of benefits. Anyway, we invested together, and we used another platform to handle that at the time. But I think out of naivety, really, I didn't come from the space, and I was like, this is shit. Why do we? I'm just going to build this myself in the weekend.
And then you
And
realize
then
that picking up people's money and putting to investment, you have to adhere to regulations and compliance and like all of the stuff,
oh yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. And then you're like, oh, this is why it's not super cheap. But you know,
Ah, fantastic. So it's kind of like microcredits, but like the kind of a VC microcredits feeling, kind of it. Like you pick it up,
it's
a lot of people, and you come as almost as an angel representative, getting money from all the other people.
so there, yeah, it's like angel communities or angel
Yeah,
networks. A lot of the time, someone's maybe investing regularly with 15 other people, but it's that one person who might be deal sourcing and doing the due
fantastic.
diligence, and we're kind of handling all of that for them.
Okay. And during this time that you were doing this, just out of curiosity, was there any deal that passed for you that you'll be like proud nowadays that like, oh, they are this big company now, or something that you saw in the earliest stages?
Yes. So one of our and this is actually such a great case study because we've always said, the people who are better at fundraising, they're not necessarily the best at building companies, right, or allocating capital. And so you've got so many people who, so this person actually was my ex flatmate, and he was a research scientist, still is a research scientist at DeepMind. I think he'd made his first investment through us, through Odin on the platform, and then he ended up. Uh, Immediately, because he was following this startup for ages, he was following the researchers for this company where they were making hardware specifically designed for processing machine learning. Um, and he brought the deal to us. We ended up doing the deal with him where we brought in all of the money, but kind of accessed it through him.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam Altman also invested in that deal. So it's like he's gone from that kind of journey from never having angel invested to investing alongside Sam Altman is like
Wow.
usually that's not a immediate kind of instant thing. A lot of people never get there. But then what happened next was he met someone else through the community, and they set up a syndicate, like this investment community together, and they invested in a company called 11 Labs. I don't know if you've heard of
Oh
them,
yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
so they got in at the first round. Um,
Wow.
and then
So
Andreessen
they're happy
Horowitz
now.
invested after them. And that again, that kind of journey is just that doesn't happen that often. And I think one of the reasons that was such a fast journey was, being immersed in the space, right? Meeting lots of other people who are also doing it. That kind of learning is really important, right? You can't just read a bunch of angel investment
Yeah.
articles or
Yeah. Fantastic. Wow. Amazing. Well, now that we have this crash course into Mary and what you do at Odin, like all of it, we can talk a little bit more about the relationship with the Lovelace series. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, like, what challenges have you faced to the audience that you would like to share, and how did you overcome them throughout your career?
I think my biggest challenge until I mean still the case I think to this day is I know some people don't believe in this. This is just a descriptive word for how I behave, but I'm very very ADHD. So throughout most of my life, it was hence all the job hopping. I find it extremely hard to do anything I don't want to do. Over time, I've seen that as a gift. So I'm never I'm never really working on anything that I don't want to be working on. Um, but that was a big challenge for a long time. My longest job before Odin was a year and 3 months. The average length was between like 3 and 9 months, and I used to get really depressed as well. So I had kind of on and off depression for over a decade, and never really understood at the time that this was completely related to my inability to do things that I'm not passionate about, and not just like it's just me and I'm always going to be depressed, which was a really again more
Yeah.
more depressing thought. But also just like everyone's obviously like you should stop jumping around. This is really bad for you, blah blah blah, and having to just kind of be like, I'm going to trust this, that I'm going to carry on going. But yeah, it's
And did you get any specific help and support for this? Because yeah, going through like psychological, mental, or whatever they want to call it, problems related to any of this stuff is quite tricky to get away of the whole by yourself. So
Yeah,
how did you
I
do?
tried.
Friends, family, and
I
all?
tried to get support. I think there wasn't really anyone who understood it. If anything, it just made it worse when people don't understand and they're trying to tell you, like this is just you, like you don't have some other problem. This is just you,
Wow.
or uh, kind of suggesting solutions that wouldn't work for me, right? Like, oh, you should really just stick with the job. Like
Oh
that's
yeah,
the
of
answer.
course.
Um, and then I tried a couple of therapists who also didn't understand it. Yeah, I don't think any of them had experience with ADHD, so they were all quite
Yeah.
confused. And then when I got an ADHD diagnosis, I only got it because I didn't want anyone to be like, yeah, but are you actually diagnosed? That's just a stupid question. The only people who get a diagnosis are the people who can afford private healthcare. Um, it's also a really bad process. It's just all leading questions, being like, "Do you do this?" And you're like, "Yes." "Do you do this?" "Yes." "Oh, you have ADHD." Literally, the psychiatrist who I had on the call, he like fell asleep in my diagnosis. Literally, he was on video call and he was nodding off.
What?
But anyway, I had that. I didn't take medication because for me, like I knew the cause. It was not working on something that I really care about, and that was just the solution. And
And then you went full force into Odin. Wow, fantastic. And because ADHD and like many other things, as you say, someone that you are depressed or you're going through this or to that, a lot of people in our society, despite everything, they still downplay and try to say like, you can get out of this. Look at this person, and they go into that survival bias by looking into one post somewhere somehow by someone that claimed that they had something and they overcame it. And they'd be like, why don't you do it like that? Uh, and it's not very constructive at all.
yeah, it's also I think quite hard to it's one of the few things, maybe one of the only things I found actually very hard to empathize with as someone who's actually experienced the thing. So when I meet someone, sorry, not meet, if I see someone online or whatever on YouTube talking about their depression, even though I've been through it and know how hard it is, when I'm not in that state, it's very hard to understand that person when they are going through that. um, so yeah, I do think it's very, very hard to understand if you're not even like currently going through it. I obviously can rationally think about like, oh, these are the things that might have helped me, but I know that me giving any of that advice isn't going to be that useful. I actually think one of the best pieces of advice I would give, because a lot of people are like, oh, you should go to the gym. And it's like, dude, if I was capable of going to the gym, I wouldn't call myself depressed. The thing that
Yeah.
really helped me was actually music. And the kind of music I was listening to, you could tell I was depressed, but I was really enjoying it, and that made a huge difference actually.
I'm curious, what kind of music was it? Was like Radiohead like a mellow kind of music or?
Actually, I think I did listen to a lot more Radiohead back in those days. Yeah, yeah, just like very mellow. It sounded kind of like warm, mellow, but
Oh,
like
okay.
someone else watching would have been like, "This sounds really depressive."
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Oh, interesting. And I'm glad that you're feeling better. But it is a journey, right? It never ends. It's one of those projects that we ever have to pay attention to it. I speak as someone that has been battling anxiety and like a food disorder, like all of it throughout my entire life, and it's not simple. Like,
Yeah.
and I can count in many, many hands the amount of therapists and psychiatrists that I've been. It's a tricky journey.
hmm It does make me a lot more grateful when I'm not going through that though. So every month I think I have PMDD. It seems like it's getting better, but I used to get very depressed once a month, and I never realized, I wasn't aware enough to realize that this was related to my cycle.
Uh,
But now, at the end of that, because I know it's temporary, I'm like, yay,
it's
this
a
temporary
Hoover.
thing is gone. Yeah.
Nah, fantastic, fantastic. And how how did you go from that to Odin and to the apparent success that Odin has and the growth and like all of it? How do you manage your health nowadays? Like because sometimes someone that goes from where you are to being a founder, you can go like too deep into it and work 80 hours per week and actually burn out into it. So are you taking care of that and how do you manage it?
I think I'm also naturally the kind of person who, like, I don't sacrifice my enjoyment of life for something else. Obviously, there's the kind of sacrifice where it's like it doesn't feel like sacrifice to go, oh, I'm working this weekend, right? That's not, oh my god, I'm making a big sacrifice. But I wouldn't. Uh, I actually think it's quite a helpful way to view things. Like it's obviously stupid to go live like you're going to die tomorrow or whatever. Um, but I think looking at things with a kind of 5 to 10 year, like if I were to die in or like 10 years, would I still be doing what I'm doing today? And that's always true. So for me, what that looks like is I work hard on Odin stuff. If I'm doing something that I really don't enjoy, I have to plan with my co-founder, like, how do we now get me off this? Like, because it's not sustainable. I'm going to burn out. I'm going to hate my life.
Mm,
Da, da, da. So it's never oh, Mary's just going to, it's not the best thing for the business either, right? Me spending time on stuff I'm bad at and don't enjoy. So it's always about if I do have to do something I don't enjoy, how do we remove that?
yeah, and I think that you mentioned something important that usually the things that we don't like are the things that we're bad. And
Mm,
there is that line, right? Sometimes you have to do a few times to become good at it, and then you start to get kind of an enjoyment out of it.
mm,
But there is always a limit, right? Okay, for example, to me, I'm horrible with like little manual stuff. And as
mm-hmm.
much as I try, it doesn't give me any joy. And it doesn't matter. Like if I go to an origami session, it will be terrible. And if I try that for like 2 months, I know I'm still gonna hate it. So I don't even try anymore. And I
Yep.
think that for work we have a lot of that as well.
Yeah. I think it's like you're always, I mean, most people are going to have to do some things they don't enjoy. It's just if it starts becoming more than 70% of my time, this doesn't make sense for anyone. But if it's going to be 10 to 20% of my time, it's kind of okay.
And it has a lot to do with that thing that you said that I quite like. Like I think some people might find it a little bit depressing when you say it, but it's fantastic way of thinking in my opinion. Would I be working on this 5 years from now? Because if you have a north direction, if you have a star that you are looking for, and you were working on something and you realize that you spent the last week 80% not doing something that directly impacts that, the next week as well, the next week as well, then what the hell are you doing, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think I'll start taking that. But and the skills that you built and what you have, like all of it, what do you think are the most important ones in like being a founder and working on the tech world today? What do you value the most?
I actually think I don't know if you'd call these skills, but I think getting to really investing time into figuring into understanding yourself is like one of the most useful things you can do. Building that self-awareness where you're truly honest with yourself, right, about what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you truly love and enjoy, not what's going to seem smart to other people or whatever. So the understanding yourself and then being able to not think too much about what other people think, that's kind of you're already going to be in a pretty good spot with those two. And then
Mm.
the other thing, again, I'm not sure if it's a skill, and I don't know how you go about building this. That would be an interesting question. Is high agency. So kind of
What
really
do you
thinking
mean?
about things where uh, you can be aware of obviously like how things might not be great and things might be not in your control, but it's not a good use of time to focus on the things that you can't control or actually
Mm.
think about things in a way where you're maybe blaming someone else even though that thing was in your control. So I hear a lot of like, oh, complaining about stuff where I'm like, but you haven't done what someone who's high agency would have done to just fix the problem. um, and I think you end up leading also not a very happy life if you feel out of control of a lot of things, right? When really a lot of things are in your control, including the way you think about something, right? Your
Mm.
um, yeah.
And do you have any tips or anything on how do you try to keep yourself in check for this high agency, like yourself nowadays? How do you try to do that?
Yeah, that's what I don't know how that came about, like why some people are like that and some people aren't. I think it's probably, maybe if I had to guess how people get there, is maybe when you have uh and this is one of the things I say to people who end up going through challenges. It's kind of like, if you have challenges that help you build resilience, that's actually very lucky that you've had the kind of challenges where you've come out kind of learning from it, right? Because
Mm.
sometimes I think the jump is so big, and like if you haven't kind of been steadily building that resilience and then you get hit with something that's really 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 incredibly hard to overcome, then that, you know, might have been too hard for someone to come out of very easily. But if you kind of do small things, right, and help you build, I think that can help build agency, because a lot of it I think is confidence and being like, I have confidence in myself to overcome this. So now it's kind of like, oh well, I've overcome these things before, so actually I already know this is something I can do. And
Ah. Oh yeah, and I think that is something that matches a lot. Like when I was working on AWS, for example, we had this concept of the principal solutions architect. These people that are really really like the best of the best, and so on, so on. And one common thing that I learned from the principal architects that worked on my team were, it's not that they knew everything, it's not that they had the answer to everything, but they knew they would get a sufficient answer good enough to move on if we give them time. And they would communicate well during that period. Like even if it take 1 month, they would not leave you hanging during that 1 month. They would come back and say like, "Hey, I've done this. I'm still looking into this." And that capacity of like almost like showing that you are always confident that and that you are actually going to deliver things, and if you're not going to deliver on the time that you wanted, it's going to be well explained, like so on. It was something that principals did it fantastically, and it's something that I try to pass to everyone on every team, that is like, you don't need to have all the answers, but you
mm-hmm,
can try to integrate the other person on the journey with you.
mm-hmm.
And okay, and you called it high agency. I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes as well, I think it's, yeah, it is that trust that you know things are going to be okay. And I think you need to go through a couple of things, you know, where at the time maybe you felt like, oh my God, I couldn't figure that out. Maybe you come across a problem, right? But then when you do solve it, you're like, oh, yeah, I am capable. So the next time there's something even harder, you're even more confident and you can persevere, right? Because a lot of these things, also, I think like sometimes the thing that helps you solve the problem, it can be a bit counterintuitive in terms of like, maybe it isn't just you sitting there trying to work out the problem, right? It might be like, sometimes for me when I try to learn something, I actually might read something in a book. I might read like 10 pages, and then it will just be sat in the back in my subconscious like mulling, and I know it's doing something, and there's trust that, you know, I don't have to sit there, oh my God, like studying this thing, trying to do that, which sometimes can be more helpful. I'm not saying it always is, but
Wow, fantastic. Nice, nice. And throughout this journey and all these learnings and all these changes and like all of it, if you have to look back now, what is the thing that you can pinpoint? Like, it's a tricky question, but what do you think is your biggest accomplishment? What is the moment that make you the proudest? Like, Mary did this.
this is this is a cop out answer. I'm sorry, but I actually don't think there is anything at the moment. It's more that that moment is so far in the future for me. Like that's I know that's going to happen in 10 to 20 years, um, but there's just like I know there is that big moment then.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward. And so it's then we can switch back to talking about that. Where do you see, like, what does the future hold for Odin, for you and the tech industry? Like, where do you think we are heading, and what do you feel Odin and you will contribute to it?
Um, I mean, this is like the 30 kind of 30-year vision. And if we don't end up getting there, hopefully we've done a bunch of other really great things. Um, one of the things that uh, I'd like to spend the next 30 years on, right, would be helping build a better system. And I don't know what that looks like, right? I think we should be careful about anyone who thinks they know for sure what a better system looks like.
Oh
But I
yeah.
think the one thing I feel like I'm reasonably sure of is that we need more people to be part of, to actually participate in shaping that future, right? And at the moment, you obviously have a very small group of people who have a lot of influence, and most of them are kind of, let's say, upper middle class straight white men, which I don't have problems with upper middle class straight white men, right? It's more that it doesn't need to be 100% of the group that are making all the decisions and dictating how the future looks and what our economic and political systems look like. So for us, it's just what can we do to help us build a better system, and that might include building a media company, right? It might include which is what we're doing now in terms of letting more people invest, but there's an educational part. There's figuring out how this might work with UK tax law. We have the IS and SEIS, and it's such an amazing scene for actually letting people, almost allocate their own tax money, because you get this tax rebate if you invest in early stage startups. um, all I know is I think everything's obviously very related, whether it's education, investment, politics, economics. Uh, and one of the reasons we started out with a community as well is because so much of this is about people, the relationships that they build, building trust between
Hmm.
different groups, and aligning incentives of different groups. And there isn't really anyone out there whose job it is to align incentives. And I think really most people are just trying to do the best they can in the system.
Yep.
And there is actually a win-win-win situation for everyone, but you just need to spend time figuring out what it is.
Yeah. Okay, great. Because even the ones that are trying to do the best, the system is so complex and it involves
Mm-hmm.
so many moving parts like all of it that usually you are kind of like locally optimizing, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
like optimizing for every part of it because it's humanly impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, and the person who's usually trying to optimize it has either not brought in enough perspectives to help them actually understand the system,
Hmm.
or they themselves haven't had enough experiences to help them actually understand the system as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and how do you see this and like the role of something like the Lovelace series and trying to spotlight women's into tech and giving a space for women to grow more? Because honestly, I don't think the biggest problem is getting women into tech, is keeping them and it's growing
Mm-hmm.
them. And how do you
Agreed.
see that part moving on?
So I think actually, yeah, a lot of the narrative around women in tech or female founders, it actually does more harm than good, in my opinion, when it's very focused on the negatives. Like, if you want to fix something, it's easier to inspire people and show them a better vision for the future, rather than like, oh, this is all doom and gloom. Like, if you want to solve climate change, there's no point constantly blasting people with like, look at all these floods, everyone thinks going to shit. Like, it makes you feel almost hopeless. Like, there's nothing, what can I possibly do to change this? And that's not how you want people to feel. So I think with things like the Lovelace series and, um, anything that spotlights women where so I until very recently, so I didn't have really any role models, and uh, that I didn't realize how important it was for me to actually see women also doing the things and having gone through similar problems than to me. So, for example, hearing from so I have these new female friends that are such badass women, and to go to actually think
Mm.
about like what does it mean to me to be feminine, and to see people who are what I consider extremely feminine but like so badass, to not have seen that before. I didn't realize like how powerful that was.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I think that it is something that I've been mentoring and like team leading and like a lot of women throughout my career and a lot of people from different background. Like once I mentoring someone that was a Palestinian software developer that wanted to uh, become a trans. So imagine how that happened in a typical Muslim family and like all of it. And one of the things that make it hard was that he didn't see anyone in front of him that looked like it. And how does that block your mind? Because it kind of limits your possibility. If you don't envisioning, you don't see.
Hmm.
And I feel that for women in tech, there 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 has been this historical notion that for women to succeed they have to take the beating, they have to build the shell that yes, you are going to have to deal with the microaggressions, you're going to have to deal with this, you cannot use this kind of clothing, you have to do this, you have to behave more like a
A
man, you
man,
don't
yeah,
have to
yeah,
do
yeah.
the emotional of it. And that is such a harmful stereotype
Mm-hmm.
to keep and to give to a people, that is like all the feminine characteristics that are like associated are harmful if you want to
Mm-hmm.
grow on your
Exactly.
career.
Yeah. Whereas like I've seen so many women where, they're uh I think you can kind of, women and men are not the same, and in general there are certain patterns, right? But it's just if you truly understand women and appreciate some of their strengths, it's like, oh, I've personally seen more women who are slightly less ego driven. Obviously there's loads of men who are also not very ego driven, but it's like there are lots of positive things. Women are actually better at investing than men, so loads of studies have shown this. But it's like we don't talk about that. We're just like, women are more risk averse and therefore da, da, da. Oh.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that's a good point. And again, the majority of the initiatives that I see for women in tech are always about getting women into tech. And I think that having someone like you and people from Odin and many others that we show here is to show that it's the transition from like I'm already into tech and I'm becoming a founder, I'm becoming a principal, I'm becoming a manager, I'm becoming someone else, and staying into tech and
Mhm.
fighting the problems that women face into it, that makes a hell of a difference. So, do you have any advice they would give to other women considering a tech career?
I mean, tech is very broad, but I would say in general, for anyone exploring a career in anything, I've found I think it can be very hard to like figure out exactly what you want to do by just thinking about it and researching. What I found is super helpful is actually just applying for jobs and using that as the research, especially jobs where they have task stages. And that helps you get a much better sense of actually what it's like to do the thing. Because then I don't have to motivate myself by being like, am I going to spend my weekend just like doing random homework? And then if you get the job and you enjoyed it, great. Um, and then also obviously get to know the team better. And then again, just being honest with yourself about what you really enjoy, what you're good at, and what you want from life. It might be that I think sometimes it can be hard to be like, oh, well, I'm on a really high salary. Do I really want to start again? But like,
Hmm.
actually, do you need that money? Like, could you be happy with a big pay cut? And you maybe would be actually a lot happier. You start again if you're really, really into it, and it's actually something that you're maybe even better at.
Oh,
In
yeah.
a couple of years is nothing, right? In the grand scheme of things.
Wow. Okay. Good. Fantastic. And before we go and to continue the flow, like, do you have any recommendations to be on the Lovelace series? Someone that I need to call tomorrow?
So I don't know if you already know her, but one of the um, actually, I've got two recommendations. There's two people I've met in the last couple of years who I count as badass female. Well, one's a female founder of a company called Why Hungry, Siddhi Mittal, um, and then a friend who started a VC fund with two other women, and they were all pregnant when they were fundraising.
Wow.
Monique, yeah, Monique Fan.
Monique Fan. Okay. Fantastic. So two more people for us to chase and to go after it. And we're planning to do a physical event in London until the end of the year. So let's see if we can put more people there and like meet and greet and learn more. But
I'm actually
Mary,
sitting next to another one as well.
oh
My
yes,
my new flatmate Abby, Abby Morris. I don't know if she's changing her company name soon, but it's currently called Compare Ethics.
fantastic to hear. And Abby, I know that I have access directly to you now, so I will invite you also. So, but Mary, thank you again very much for this. And if you have any final words, now is the time. Because how should people talk to you and understand more about Odin and Mary? Just it's your time.
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, uh, Mary Lynn Odin. If you search that, you'll find me. I've got, if you're familiar with Elizabeth Holmes, I've basically got her photo as my profile picture, but I've pasted my face on it very badly.
Okay.
So that's me on LinkedIn. And then
So grooming. So you are going to Forbes 30 under 30 soon.
I'm already in Forbes 30 over 30, hopefully.
I'm kidding. Okay, Mary. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
and
Tiago.
see you soon. Bye bye.
See ya.